All right, folks. Thank you all for waiting. No, we've been waiting so long to gather like this in public, and so we're so delighted to have you all here. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Haruka Raudabush. I'm the Senior Programs Manager here at the Japanese Cultural and Community Center of Northern California. And I'd like to welcome you all and also welcome our friends from down south at the Little Tokyo Historical Society, without whom we could not have today's event. So thank you all so much. And also thank you so much for working with us to keep everyone's health and safety in mind, and continuing to mask up and to provide your proof of vaccination. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jeffrey.
Thank you, Haruka, for the wonderful introduction. It is simply an honor to be here amongst you to celebrate the launch of our book, A Rebel's Outcry, along with a screening of Little Tokyo Reporter. We have a very exciting evening for you that will include a panel emceed by Mia Iwataki and with Kenji Taguma and Karen Korematsu. And so I'd like to just do a quick acknowledgement, firstly, of the great support of the Little Tokyo Historical Society, without whom we would not be able to make this happen. And so Little Tokyo Historical Society, I'm lucky enough to be a board member, and we focused on preserving and telling the history, stories of Little Tokyo and Japanese Americans in Southern California, which happens to be, with our history about Sei Fujii, he had influence over Asian American and all minority communities across California. So we're very excited to expand on that. Also, I would like to acknowledge our USC community sponsor. And so Grace Shiba, who is here in the back, and hopefully you guys will have a chance to meet her later. Darlene Larson, who's not able to make it physically, but she's here in spirit. Little Tokyo Historical Society members who drove all the way from Southern California and flew up from Southern California just today. Cindy Abrams, Jonathan, and Cynthia Tanaka, who without their great donations, we actually wouldn't have any books with us today. And so very great donations. We also have Sheriff Miyamoto and Richard Ju. We have Emiko Tominaga, who is, I would say, would be the great grandniece of Sei Fujii. Superior Court Judge Lillian Singh. Former Executive Director of Angel Island, Eddie Wong. Current Executive Director, Ed Tepburn. Amongst them is Helen Zia and Felicia Lowe and several others. We have representatives of City Administrator Carmen Chu's office here. You'll see later that we have a bunch of books that were graciously donated by J. Marion Wright's family, who is the law partner of Sei Fujii. And so those books will accompany every single one of the Rebels Outcries you guys pick up today. Union Bank and Arutani Care Grants. The author Kenichi Sato and the late Hiro Hishiki and Junko Maruya of the Kashu Mainichi. Fumiko Carol Fujita, our co-publisher, who's not able to make it, but I want to say hi. So hopefully you see us on the webcast. And of course, Haruka Raudabush at the JCCCNC, and of course, the administration here. So with that, I wanted to have a quick announcement with Sheriff Miyamoto. The line doesn't go too long here.
Good evening, everyone. I really appreciate this, Jeffrey. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you all for being here tonight. I apologize. I was a little late because we're doing a tree lighting. But the fact that we're all together here like this, the fact that we're doing the tree lighting out there at McLaren Lodge in Golden Gate Park, it speaks to the fact that we're all coming together a little more now. in dealing with COVID and dealing with all the different things. It's nice to see that as we've shared this as a community as a whole, as a world community, that we're now being able to come out and be together like this. And it's things like this, it's events like this that honor and celebrate a book like this, which in going over someone's history and going over someone's experiences in the dealings of adversity and challenges that Sei had in his life, sharing that with our community, it doesn't just touch the Japanese American community, this touches the community as a whole. And it's really important that we can come together physically, but more importantly, come together through shared experiences that are reflected in the book. I personally am affected by this because as a fourth generation, as a Yonsei here, my experiences have been different, and my adversities and challenges have been different, but it is still something that collectively we as a community should share with each other so that we can all learn, we can all support, and we can all be a part of something bigger than each of us individually. So Jeffrey also, although he's probably not going to say it here, is an accomplished and very skilled producer, videographer, somebody who captures the moment, captures people's experiences in different media other than just writing. And that was how we joined, had met, and he did a little video for me. And I really appreciated that. And I just wanted to make sure that I would be a part of this celebration and what he's also accomplished here with the book. And so thank you very much for the opportunity to say something and to thank you for everything you've done for us. Thank you. This is really short here, so.
Yeah, we have a separate mic on that side, but that's awesome. Thank you so much, Sheriff Miyamoto. Of course, we have many other family and friends here who have mentored me, and so of course I will individually acknowledge you later. But I wanted to begin our show, include my first grade teachers here too, somewhere here, and classmates from high school, old family friends. But I wanted to introduce our first part of the program, which is a screening of my first short film, Little Tokyo Reporter, which focuses on Sei Fujii's life in 1935 Little Tokyo, where he confronted injustice and corruption within his own community, and sort of the legacy that he laid out for the next generation.
When I came to America in 1903 to study law, I knew as a non-citizen I could never become a lawyer. I vowed to change this. This was much harder to do than I imagined. In fact, if not for my partnership with Wright, the Anglo half of our law practice, we would have accomplished nothing. Instead, when thousands of Japanese Americans were dying during the 1918 flu epidemic, we were able to successfully argue before the Supreme Court that a hospital for these non-citizens, my people, should be built. And now, through my newspaper, through my words, the fight goes on. Speaking to you from the offices of the Japanese California Daily News. Here to prove to the old folks that the new generation is an asset and not the burden they used to be, I present to you our Issei pageant's winner.
Thank you, Mr. Fujii-san. It is my great pleasure to be voted as the Issei Week Queen. Many thanks to my family and those who purchased goods. With your support, I hope to attend college and perhaps help those at the newly built hospital.
You heard it here first. Not only will this beauty and her supporters help us through this depression, she's already planning on giving back. What a gem, boys.
Everyone else has gone home, and you're still stuck here like a lone samurai.
Marion Wright.
I see you've been keeping busy, writing good news. Guides for the community. Fujii tells them how to live.
We need to keep a positive image here. If the US government doesn't trust us, we get nowhere.
Since when do you play it safe? This community's full of risk takers.
We've had this conversation.
They call themselves the Japanese gentlemen. And they certainly look the part, dressed in tuxedos. Some club. They take money from poor farmers that they get drunk. Whole life savings.
Just gambling. In Japanese culture, it's a man's favorite pastime. It's tradition.
Tradition? That trust that you're talking about, they're gonna run that well dry.
I don't want any more threats. And I don't want bad press. We still can't buy land because people think we steal their jobs. Makes the whole community look like a bunch of unkempt gangsters.
"この島で俺の言うこと聞いといたら何にも心配することないんや。あ？ミスター佐藤。はい。お客さんを丁重に扱って気持ちよくさせる。な？この町の連中のことをよう知ってるお前やからできることや。のう？そのお前がな、これけ！あ？やる気ないと出ていくか？すいません。
昔々, once upon a time, there was an old couple who found a boy who was born from a peach. They named him Momotaro, Peach Boy. He was small, but he grew very strong. One day, he decided to travel to a far-away island. Before departing, he shouted aloud for the first time, これから 鬼の征伐に. From now on, I am on a quest to conquer the ogres.
My mother used to tell me the story of Peach Boy, too, you know?
What I do is nothing. I wouldn't have anyone to read to if it weren't for you. And your radio program? You make everyone feel so hopeful.
I try to do the right thing, but sometimes.
The hospital. You fight for us. You're what the Issei need, not me. You're someone to look up to.
Building that place.
Saved a lot of lives. Fujii-san, I know you'll make the right choices. Perhaps you should find a single woman, maybe a wife. You never asked me any questions for the paper.
Perhaps another time? That's why I chose a private booth.
待って。
Please. I cannot accept this.
My husband, he doesn't need it.
Thank you for this.
どうぞ。ようこそお越しくださいました。Please。
あ、いや、お構いなく。
確か新聞の物書きですね。
앉으셔라.
Fujii-san, right?
I don't drink.
We are entitled. It's our right. In this place, you can be a king of your own domain. Have a drink? Kanpai.
You like to drink. What are you getting away from?
I just like the taste. Makes me forget a little. You know, Fujii-san, this whole place used to be mine. I don't approve of everything that goes on here. But I can be sure of a paycheck. My wife, she runs our bookstore, reads to kids, makes them believe this place is a fairy tale. It's not true, you know.
Could be true. If this is the tradition we teach our children, nothing good can come of it.
It's not tradition. It's human nature. Take care of your own.
おい何じゃこらお前が何やってんだやめなさい
He's with me.
もう帰りかと思いましてねこの東京クラブの駅時期待しますペーパーボーイ
What are you doing with your life? Why are you wasting your money in there and making a scene?
They think I'm just a dumb farmer.
Well, let's show them that you're much more than that. I took the boy in. He told us everything about the club, the fixed cards, the prostitution, luring them in, getting the clients drunk, and taking their money. I had to take a stand.
Extra, extra, farmer's bamboozled.
Your paper, sir? I just got a couple questions. Is it true you take advantage of the Oriental people through your sale of liquor and gambling? And how does that make you feel knowing you swindle your own people day in and day out, huh? Huh? Hey! Hey!
おいなんだよこれこれ何やあこれどうしたんですか見てみんけ
ちょっと話しただけですよ
話って何の話だこれおい始末ってこんかい聞いてんのかこらおい おい、
はい。
Newspaper man! Got plenty, not too much of nothing! Nothing! Ha!
Smell booty in here.
もうしでもどうや。なんじゃおら。
Oh. How about the whole store? Mind you, man.
I can't serve you here.
We're not asking. Wagataga. Ochi! Sato-san.
Hey.
I having good fun time. You run this town. You take care of all that. Huh?
Greetings to my community. Once upon a time, I was told the story of a small samurai who traveled to a far-off island to defeat demons and ogres. I came to America with that same dream. Little Tokyo became my new home. I studied law, and I made friends with Americans. I opened a newspaper to celebrate our growing population and fantasized about the ideals. I chose not to see the evils that were plaguing our people. I wanted to believe that Little Tokyo was a town where everyone looked after one another, where we could respect ourselves like true gentlemen. This incident has provoked much public opinion, and it is with strong conviction that the Japanese California Daily News and its supporters will continue to live up to principles of justice and truth. I believe in America, and I still believe in Little Tokyo.
Once upon a time, there was an old couple who found a boy who was born from a peach. They named him Momotaro, Peach Boy. He was small, but he grew very strong. He was always thinking, though he never said a word. One day, he decided to travel to a faraway island, but before departing, he shouted aloud for the first time, "From now on, I am on a quest to conquer the ogres."
Read the Japanese California Daily News. It's the guide to Little Tokyo. Read all about it.
Do you remember the Japanese Sandman? Here he is again on our Friendly Five program.
Wow, thank you so much for watching. Did you guys enjoy it? This is our first in-person screening of the film, I guess, this year in 2021. But yeah, I wanted to first introduce briefly about our upcoming book, and I would like to introduce right after our MC for our program. So tonight we are celebrating our official book launch of A Rebel's Outcry. It's based on the official biography of Sei Fujii, which includes historical photos, documents, and original artwork. And so in our program tonight, we'll have a wonderful panel of civil rights advocates and community leaders, and we'll be discussing the book briefly, but also discuss how we preserve and promote the civil rights legacy we have in our community. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mia Iwataki. She's been involved in civil rights advocacy for many, many years, and she also used to run radio programs and is a producer as well. She was very involved with the Redress Commission, and also she's currently the vice president of the Little Tokyo Historical Society. And so that's one of the many reasons why she's here, but she's also a huge fan of Sei Fujii.
Good evening, folks. It all began in May 2010 with a chance meeting at the National Asian American Pacific Islander Historic Preservation Conference in San Francisco when Carol Fujita met Jeffrey Chin and told him about the research she had been doing on the Japanese hospital and Sei Fujii. And Jeffrey was intrigued by the man and the story, and he wanted to make a movie. A few months later in August, they went to Medford, Oregon to meet with J. Marion Wright's daughter, Janice LaMarre, who was 89 at the time. Wright, as you saw, was Fujii's law partner when they overturned the California alien land law. And she gave her blessing and the right to do the story. But she also showed Jeffrey a copy of Kenichi Sato's book about Sei Fujii that was in Japanese. A little later that year, Jeffrey started developing a screenplay for his USC grad school project.
Actually, right before USC. So this is before USC.
Wow. Okay. All right. With each application for grant funding, he continued to perfect his script. By the end of the year and in the beginning of January, he contacted Chris Tashima, who agreed to play the role of Sei Fujii. And if you know, Chris Tashima won an Academy Award for the movie Visas for Virtue, which was about Chiune Sugihara, who was considered the Japanese Schindler. And Chris became Jeffrey's mentor. In fact, Jeffrey said that Chris told him, always aim high because you can always trickle down. But if you aim low, you can't trickle up. And you can see that by the quality of the film and the book that we'll be talking about soon. Finally, around 2012, Little Tokyo Reporter was finished in 2 years, which is amazing for a film like this. In Shige Higashi, the Japanese cultural news publisher, had worked for the Kashu Mainichi, and he knew Kenichi Sato. So he gave Carol and Jeffrey an introduction to Kenichi, and Jeffrey went to Japan with Carol and showed Kenichi clips from Little Tokyo Reporter, and Kenichi loved it. And he gave Jeffrey and Carol the rights to the book and all his research. And today, 10 years later, we're celebrating the launch of A Rebel's Cry. So every community needs a hero. I came of age during the movement of the 60s and 70s, even though I don't look that old. But at that time, you know, at school, we never saw people that looked like us. So we had to look to Asia to find our heroes. And in the US, a lot of us in the movement looked at the civil rights movement and the Black and Chicano liberation movements for our heroes. But every community needs a hero. And a hero is a person who does, an ordinary person who does extraordinary things. So Sei Fujii was an Issei born during a time of extreme anti-Asian hate, which we're starting to see again today. Sei Fujii was an ordinary man who, when he saw an injustice, did something about it. A hero is an ordinary person who does extraordinary things. This book is not just about Sei Fujii. It's about our Issei generation. It's a history lesson of survival and building community in a hostile environment. It's a history lesson that has meanings for all generations today in particular. And so we are so proud to have all of you here and to share A Rebel's Cry with you and to really emphasize the importance of education and of preserving history and of struggle today. We have this fabulous panel, and I'd like to bring each one up. Well, first, we have, of course, Jeffrey Chin. And Jeffrey is a commercial and feature film editor, director, and publisher. He's presented at Walt Disney Family Museum and ABC's Good Morning America, and is best known for his award-winning short, Little Tokyo Reporter, which has won 21 film awards. The film, Jeffrey is also a protege of the late John Singleton and has worked on Showtime's Billions and FX's Snowfall. Jeffrey. And next we'd like to invite Kenji Taguma. Kenji is an award-winning journalist and the founding president of the Nichibei Foundation and editor-in-chief of the community newspaper, the Nichibei Weekly. As the Nichibei Times closed in the summer of 2009, Kenji led the movement to create the Nichibei Foundation, an educational and charitable nonprofit, and launched the first nonprofit ethnic newspaper of its kind in the country, the Nichibei Weekly. Kenji. And we'd like to introduce Dr. Karen Korematsu, who all of you know. Dr. Korematsu is the executive director and founder of the Fred T. Korematsu Institute. She is a public speaker, educator, and civil rights advocate. In 2009, she established the Fred T. Korematsu Institute to advance racial equity, social justice, and human rights for all. In 2015, she was inducted as the first non-lawyer member of the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. She serves on the board of directors of Advancing Justice and of NAPABA Law Foundation. Let's welcome Karen. So we're going to start with Jeffrey. Jeffrey, this has been a passion project for you. What was it about the life and times of Sei Fujii that captured your interest and commitment to these projects?
I think growing up in the Bay Area, especially in Marin County, I was very lucky to grow up in Marin, but I also didn't get to see the role models that looked like me in our community there. And so a lot of times I would spend the summers and spend it with my grandfather, who was a community leader in New York Chinatown. And when he passed away, I think it really clicked in my mind that if we don't start telling our stories and protecting and promoting those histories, it's going to quickly be forgotten. And so that's what drove me to learn a little bit more about Sei Fujii. It also helped that my parents are attorneys. So I wanted to figure out an interesting way to tell a story about an attorney. And I think hopefully you guys enjoyed it. That's my short answer.
So when you shot this film, it introduced you to so many different things. How did it change your life?
Well, the short film, we thought that, of course, we were reaching for as many film festivals as we could. But what happened basically every 2 years after we finished the short film was that the community rallied to do something even greater. So in 2015, we were able to build a historic monument in Little Tokyo, designed by Miles Endo, son of Kenny Endo. And then in 2017, through the great effort of the Japanese American Bar Association, we were able to get the posthumous law degree for Sei Fujii. So he is actually the first Japanese American to receive a posthumous law degree in California, or law license in California. And of course, in 2019, we got historic designation for the Japanese hospital, which was built in direct response to the 1918 flu epidemic. So sort of echoing what we're going through right now, but back then, the Japanese community didn't have access to that type of healthcare. And that was through the great effort of Kristen Hayashi and Mike Okamura of our Historical Society. And finally, we have a book. And so I'm so happy with that legacy.
So someone came up to you and said, "Oh, I saw your film, Little Tokyo Reporter. I loved it." But Sei Fujii was just a newspaper publisher. How would you respond to him?
Well, I think when people think about JA newspaper and publishers, they might see them solely as that, but slowly, and especially speaking with Kenji and the rest of everyone else, is that we've learned that they're much more, they're the voice for the community. And what I found out doing more research about Sei Fujii was that even before World War II, he was working to help build labor unions for Latino, Filipino, Chinese, and Japanese farm laborers in San Diego. Later, he actually ran for 6 years in a race relations campaign, working directly with Hugh Macbeth, whose son would work in the reparations cases. And so when we think about someone who might be considered simply a publisher, they wear many hats, and the way that they outreach and use the tools that they have access to fight for the community. I mean, Sei Fujii, for example, was an incredible example of what can be done when you're restricted.
Well, one of the favorite parts of the book that people have mentioned is musubi diplomacy. Can you talk about that?
So one of all of our favorite things to do is to eat. And so Sei Fujii, when he was on his way to win his first major Supreme Court case, he was heading to Washington, D.C. He brought the rice balls. And so he had, I never pronounce it correctly, but the rice balls, onigiri.
Onigiri.
Yeah, okay. So he was carrying those, he packed those with him on the train, and he actually shared it with the chef on the train. And that was a way that he built connections. And he sort of called it his musubi or rice ball diplomacy, in the way to connect with other people outside of his community.
And he did connect with other people. Can you talk about how Sei Fujii, worked with other communities and what lessons we can learn from that today?
Well, one of the most important lessons or accomplishments that Sei Fujii did was he overturned the California Alien Land Law. And that is the law that had prohibited any immigrant who is ineligible from citizenship from owning land in California. And if you look at the African-American community, they had a similar struggle of purchasing land when they came over, from East Coast to West Coast. And, his partnership with Hugh Macbeth, I believe that there was a lot of exchange about how are we going to help our communities set root in this country, set root in this state? And so, I think that his many connections with other communities is, I don't know why he's so inspirational and maybe an example of what we can do for ourselves today.
There was so much research that went into this. And even when, we talked with the woman that translated Sei Fujii's book, from Japanese into English, she had to do a lot of research. And there were some beautiful photos in there. And I'd like to talk to Kenji next. Kenji, your organization has really, played a leading role in helping to preserve our history and, a lot of the research that we got on Sei Fujii. Can you talk about the Nichibei Shimbun collection and why it's so important to our community and why it's so important to continue the role of Nichibei?
Certainly. The publication that we started in 2009, we're the same age. The Nichibei Weekly was a direct descendant, a third generation Sansei publication descended from the Nichibei Shimbun. A few years ago, when the Hoji Shimbun, Hoover Institute was putting together the Hoji Shimbun digital collection, I approached the Abiko family, whose grandparents ran the paper, to try to get their blessing for the collection because Stanford wanted to do it right. So we got them all on board. And there's copies of this article over there about the launch of the Hoji Shimbun collection. But I think right now there's like 500,000 pages, so many different pre-war publications in the Nichibei Shimbun, and the Kashu Mainichi is there. Great research tool. You can do search words and everything. But there's so many stories there. And the fascinating thing about the Sei Fujii book is that the story was always there. It's just that people had to look for it. Right. And you did a wonderful job with the film. We showed the film at our Films of Remembrance in 2013, I think, and the wonderful book as well. But there are so many stories that are out there waiting, screaming to be discovered. And these are stories of our Issei. And if you just go to the Hoji Shimbun collection, you can find it. And when we were born in probably the worst economic time in 40 years in 2009, it was a very tough time. We felt it was important to be there to support other nonprofits who are struggling as well. We were, publicizing their programs, their events, their fundraisers. And then a month after the Nichibei Times closed in September, the Hokubei Mainichi, the last bilingual newspaper here, closed without warning, like 3 days warning. So it's become even more imperative. And what I really have grown to appreciate, not only our mission of keeping the community connected, informed, and empowered, but I'm really in awe of the role of documenting our community's history for years to come. It's not just for today, but it's 50 years, 100 years down the line, as you find when researching the Kashu Mainichi. Whereas one community leader told me, we're validating our experience, and we're the last line of documenting history. And so there's a historical aspect to that, and there's also the more contemporary importance of documenting and shedding light on community movements, like the Buchanan Hotel or efforts to preserve Japantown.
In the book, A Rebel's Outcry, we see how Sei Fujii thought about and began and started the Kashu Mainichi. So as a publisher, a newspaper publisher yourself, what takeaways did you get from that?
I think it was bold, and I agree that we don't give enough voice to the Issei. We don't show enough respect to them, perhaps. I think like Sei Fujii and people like Shichinosuke Asano, who founded the Nichibei Times after the war, and Kyutaro Abiko, of course, the legendary newspaper man. They all came here with pretty much nothing, right? Abiko came here with $1, and they still ventured to new lands and created things that would help to bind and guide the community. So I have a really large respect for people who started publications. Mm-hmm. Having to do that myself, it wasn't easy. It's still hard, but fortunately we're getting a lot of support now. It's a very a bold initiative, and I think it's something that gives out lasting rewards, and being the voice for the community, being a voice for the voiceless, issues that are marginalized in mainstream press. It's very important to shed light on those topics.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the contributions is Sei Fujii showed that JA newspapers could give the community a voice and take a stand on civil rights issues. And I remember when, we were struggling in LA, all over for redress and reparations, we considered the Raf Shimpo our partner, because every time there was a critical, juncture, they would be there, and, they got the word out where we couldn't. And so can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know at the Nichibei, there was an example you gave of the railroad workers that never would have come to light.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that without the collective force of the Nikkei press, Japanese American community press, back in the 80s, there wouldn't have been such a successful movement for the redress movement. Even if you didn't subscribe to a paper, you knew someone who knew someone, and they would tell you how to go to this meeting and sign up for redress. So I think the role in redress cannot be underplayed. One example that I talked about is a movement for the railroad and mine worker redress. They were in the interior, so they were not excluded from the West Coast, but there was some indication that they were fired by the railroad companies due to government pressure. And there was this case that was being made. There was a smoking gun, a graduate student found some records, and this movement was kind of orchestrated by Michi Wegland, the great author activist, who, I was in my mid 20s at the time, and she's calling me for hours at a time. It's kind of weird. But, she kept on encouraging, you got to look at the railroad workers and then the Japanese, Latin Americans too. And so I interviewed Fumi Shimada, a school teacher in Sacramento, and seen the pain and the tears in her eyes as she recounted how her father got fired by the railroad worker, I forgot what railroad company was. So he told the family that he was going to commit suicide and also kill Fumi and do a double suicide so they can, the rest of the family could survive. And at the time I was burnt out. I was about to quit being an editor because it was just way too much work. And, but through that, I really found my purpose, and that being a voice for the voiceless, particularly at that time, needed to happen. So, Michi would get all the railroad and mine worker families to write into the community press, letters to the editor. I wrote an editorial supporting their movement. We did the longest article on that. And then a couple of months after that article ran, they were awarded redress by then Assistant Civil Rights Attorney General Bill Ann Lee in Little Tokyo, announced it to the NCR folks and the railroad workers.
That's great.
So that was very gratifying.
When we hear stories like this, it just is kind of surprising and sad that JA periodicals, and I'm sure this is happening in our other communities too, are struggling. And in our community, we have to get rid of that habit of, like, your parents subscribe to Raf Shimpo, and when they finish, they give it to you, then you give it to your brother or sister. And, we need to have a campaign to get people to subscribe and support our newspapers. But the other night when we were on the Zoom call, you made a comment that the Nikkei press is probably one of the most taken for granted institutions in the community. What makes you say that, and how can we change that?
It's that form of recycling that we discourage, right? Recycling is great, just not of newspapers, except, mainstream newspapers. No, just kidding. But yeah, it is. I think we were asked a lot to publicize this and that, and I think there's, it'd be nice to get more support of the Nikkei press. We're certainly doing some things as a nonprofit. We're actually kind of thriving right now, thanks to great funding from the Henry and Tomoya Takahashi Charitable Foundation, our sustaining sponsor, and many others. I think, with our educational programs as well, that bring a different dynamic to it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Karen Korematsu, Why do you feel a rebel's outcry is so important and timely today? And how can this be used as a tool to educate? Because that's one of the main themes for your foundation, your institute.
Well, thank you, and good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Jeff and congratulate him not only on the film I knew of, but not very, extensively about, Mr. Fujii, and what touched me is the opportunity to talk about the Issei. I mean, Kenji touched on that, because immediately I thought about my grandpa Korematsu, and thinking about the Issei, that we don't talk about them, and thinking about even our education programs, how we need to to be more thoughtful and inclusive in their stories, because it's part of our immigration story. We're talking about immigration in this country, and the courage it took for them to come to a strange land. And they wanted to do better for themselves. I mean, of course, Japan was in a terrible economic situation at the beginning, end of 1800s, beginning of 1900s. And so they were looking for that opportunity. But then also, of course, the backstory is, as the US does when they want cheap labor, right? They went into Japan to recruit farmers, right, from the 5 prefectures that were heavily agricultural in Japan. And I try to include that as part of the story that I tell, because it also relates to the way that they were treated here in America, especially on the West Coast, because they were doing so well, right? It was the same outcry that we hear today. They're taking away our jobs, they're taking away our land. And we want to remind our young people that the struggles really that we are seeing now in some ways are really not that new. That from generation to generation, I mean, we need to kind of keep fighting. And I think that's at the root of the story, because of Sei Fujii's civil rights activism. I mean, I didn't kind of think about that. It's like Issei as civil rights activists. Because I'm so entrenched in the Nisei, not necessarily the Issei, and kind of taking them for granted. And so I think it's so important to tell this story and to bring the light to, I mean, not only for his journalism, and then also to use, as an example, to encourage other Asian American journalists, that we need more Asian American journalists as well. Not only to write in our Asian American newspapers, but in just newspapers in general, because they can share our story, and hopefully this will be a way of helping them to learn their own history. Because if we don't know our own history, then we keep repeating the same mistakes. And that's what the Korematsu Institute is, what our education efforts is about. And so I think that's why this story, just not only journalism, but just the law, the fact, because I tell, when I'm talking about my father's story, I talk about my grandpa, who was able to buy land in East Oakland, in an industrial part of East Oakland, before the Alien Land Law took effect on August 18, 1913. And then I explained that after that time, if you were an immigrant in this country, you couldn't buy land, right? That's what but we want these young people to understand that land is important, and that people fight for it. This has been the history of our country, and it's not just the white man. It's for Asian Americans, because we're seen to be as invisible. right? And the perpetual foreigner, and being used as scapegoats, especially now with the start of COVID and the anti-Asian violence. So this is why the Korematsu Institute's education really has extended itself to bring its relevancy of education issues today, that we want our children to be prepared to handle these kinds of crises that we are now having to deal with today, i.e. the pandemic.
Wow, you answered all my questions.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great.
As many of my friends know here, you just get me started, wind me up, and I keep going.
No, you're the ideal radio guest. So you touched on this a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about how education can expand the conversation and prepare the next generation to recognize and confront injustice? And do you feel that's being done today? And how are the Asian American Studies classes doing?
Well, that's the big challenge. I mean, even though with San Francisco State, in 80, what year was that? For ethnic studies, I just went out of my head.
Third World Liberation Struggle?
Yeah.
That was 1968 or 60.
No.
Eddie, what year was that?
Somebody, I can't remember the date, but anyway, sorry, 68. And so, that was kind of the start, right, of trying to get API studies into the classroom. And, but that's, California. I mean, the Fred Korematsu Institute is a national organization, and I work with teachers all across this country. California is at least making some progress, but obviously where we're seeing many of the major attacks on our Constitution, for instance, are in other states, right? And so now teachers, the legislatures are actually creating bills that will prevent teachers from teaching certain subjects. So you've heard about the critical race theory, and to ban that, to talk, that you can't talk about race. And so we started this, but we haven't come in a lot of ways very far. Fortunately, through our California State Superintendent, Tony Thurmond, last year when there was a legislative bill for California that would require a ethnic studies course as a graduating requirement for high school students. I mean, it's only like one semester, big deal, but at least it's something. Be ethnic studies. That's a start. And now we have the legislative bill passed that will ensure that ethnic studies is taught, at least in California, schools, right? Because we want to show the intersectionality of the history of our country, that the struggles that the indigenous and the African Americans, Latinx and the Asian Americans is you change the faces and the names, but a lot of those struggles are the same. And we need to understand that. We need to work together. And students need to know that they're not the only ones. Sometimes they just get caught up in that feeling of they're the only ones, whatever ethnicity they are, right? And so that's why ethnic studies is so important if we're going to make change in this country. But but that's California. Now that's it. I've got 49 states to go. It's my feeling. Fortunately, Tony Thurmond in appointed me as one of the ambassadors to education for the state of California, which has helped me to make some inroads in other states. I mean, it's great honor, but then that helps. Because then I can explain to them, and now states are contacting me to help them. Georgia, which is that's promising, now wants to do ethnic studies for their state, so they've contacted me to work with them. We do have API studies in the state of Illinois. So that was passed as a legislative bill. So, but it's still hit and miss. And if we're going to get away from Asian Americans being looked at as the perpetual foreigner, and that, even when I was growing up in the East Bay and going to school in San Leandro, San Lorenzo, and talking about, we're coming up to the anniversary of, I should say the recognition of Pearl Harbor on December 7th. I mean, kids would look to me back then and say it was my fault for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Go back to where you came from. You don't belong here. And now they're saying this again to Asian American students in the classroom. The same thing that happened after 9/11, 2001, when the Muslim and Amimsa community kids were also being attacked and blamed for something that was clearly not their fault. So that's why we haven't learned from the lessons of history yet. But that's our goal, and to have the journalism and the newspapers and is what we're going to need also as part of our education to sustain this.
Okay. Thank you. That was pretty powerful. I did want to ask one last question for the panel. I was just, while you were talking, there's so much happening today, the anti-Asian hate and this crummy past administration. And I think how can we use the legacy of Sei Fujii to help strengthen, the young people today to stand up? I know for us, I think we were really fortunate to be able to have, gone through the whole redress and reparations struggle, because we saw, we lived through our community standing together and taking a stand and being stronger for it, and recognizing that we won with the help of other communities, and that when 9/11 happened, JAs were the first, among the first to step up. And, with the immigration struggles, we know what family separation is, and we know what it is to be put in detention. And I don't consider the redress and reparations struggle over, because we're still struggling for Black reparations in HR 40. So how can we use a tool like, discovering about, legacies like Sei Fujii's to help create leaders today, or to, generate that type of excitement? I'll start with Jeffrey.
It's very hard to follow up after Karen and Kenji. One of the things that I felt impacted me a lot, especially, I'm not young anymore, but I'm sort of semi-young person.
Yeah, compared to.
But basically that, during this time where we had a lot of anti-Asian hate, I realized that a lot of our community, our young Asian Americans, have not been educated properly in Asian American history and the legacy of our community's involvement in civil rights. And it's not to tout our experience to feel that it's any more or less important than anyone else's. It's about having that shared knowledge that we've contributed for over a century in fighting for equal education, land ownership, mixed race marriages, and giving that sort of power for our young adults to understand and use those tools to help bridge and fight for equal rights for other people. And so I think that's very important. So I feel very proud that this book hopefully will, even give a glimpse of that legacy and path that Sei Fujii took in the face of discrimination and inspire that next generation.
Karen or Kenji, and kind of short, because I kind of wanted to share the conversation with the audience too for a few minutes.
Oh, okay. Just another experience that I had a few years ago. Japan Times had asked me to write a reaction to the elections, and so the day after elections, I was trying to formulate my response and saw nothing but hate crimes against everybody except for straight white males. So I got pissed, called the Bay Area Day Remembrance Consortium for a meeting that night. And then within 8 days, we organized this thing called United for Compassion. And we, using our experience as Japanese Americans scapegoated during the war, to speak out against issues of racism and scapegoating, because 2 weeks after the elections, there was 750 documented cases of hate by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we felt it was important to speak out for others, Japanese Americans and Native Americans and Muslim Americans as well. A couple years after that, in 2018, we did a United for Compassion 2. I think Karen spoke at that, and this was focused on the Muslim ban and family separation of the borders. And I'm always proud of our community for, even after 9/11, for being at the front lines and speaking out in behalf of the Muslim and Arab community. So I think we have that rebellious spirit of the Issei, like Sei Fujii and others who came before us, to thank for this compassion to help speak out for others using our experience.
Well, Sei Fujii really is an example of one man who can make a difference. And I hope that his story is going to inspire others, because it's, especially as I said, as an immigrant coming to this country and wanting to practice law and knowing he couldn't even get a law license. That's amazing to me that he just never gave up. And so, he's a hero. Like, I consider, I'm prejudiced, of course, my father, Fred Korematsu, as being a hero, but also he was one man who stood up for what is right. And so in bringing it to what's happening today, like, for instance, I'll put in a real quick plug for Fred Korematsu Day. You may have seen these cards, which is on January 30th in perpetuity for the state of California and now 6 other states. This year, our theme is stand up for what is right, get vaccinated. So I would be remiss, as we're all wearing masks, to encourage everyone to get vaccinated, both COVID and flu. And we need this to really go forward and make sure that the next time we get together, that we don't have to wear a mask, yes. Right? So join us on January 30th. We're doing a virtual korematsuinstitute.org. We have a grant through the Asian American Pacific Islander Health Forum and the CDC. So that's, we're doing this nationally as a push, to get everyone vaccinated, students and educators and teachers, families. I mean, this is what's important at this time. But in bringing that to full circle, it's, everyone has a story, but there are certain stories that we want to share that will hopefully inspire the younger generation as well, that they can be, a civil rights advocate. You just have to say, I'll volunteer, and that's all you need to do.
Are there any questions from the audience or comments? Okay, don't be Asian. Okay, great.
Oh, Jeff, you're a Chinese American who grew up in a very traditional Chinese American family. What made you do such a great story and wrote about the Japanese American civil rights? Because
good question.
Even within our own Asian American communities, we have some misunderstanding and not so much understanding of each other. Right. I'm really happy that Chinese American wrote such a wonderful story about a great Japanese American hero. Yeah. So what made you do that?
It was a musubi.
It was the musubi?
Yeah.
So for people on the stream who can hear the question is, and it's probably one of the main questions I get is, as a Chinese American, why did I choose to tell a story about a Japanese American civil rights leader? And, it happened through luck, actually. There was a period of time that I was focusing on a lot of Angel Island documentaries. And I had this big dream of wanting to make sort of Spielberg-esque films and really show the world that the Asian American community experienced is sort of like what my grandfather did when he was setting up in New York Chinatown at the end of the Tong Wars. And so attending the first Asian Pacific Islander Historic Preservation Forum here in Japantown, I was actually able to connect with the Little Tokyo Historical Society founder Bill Watanabe and Fumiko Carol Fujita. And they talked about this history of a civil rights leader who fought and helped build a hospital for his community. And I thought to myself that for me, that's an important story, but what's a better way to bring that story to others so they can appreciate it? And through the research, we found that he was willing to risk his own life. There was not only just one assassination attempt, there was many assassination attempts on his life to try to stop him from what he was doing. And he was just firm in standing up for what he believed for his community. And, you know, it also, in the research, we've learned so much about his nuanced journey that every time I learn more about him, I just get more excited. And so for me, I think this is just almost the beginning, because I hope to do a feature film on this guy as well.
Are there other questions or comments? Yes.
Hi, this is for Karen. I'm a student from Essex State, and I actually grew up in Florida. I just wanted to say how important it is, like the work that you're doing, because like when we get California, it's like such a culture shock. So like for the first time in my life, be around Asian Americans and other people. And like growing up in Florida, like you don't hear that stuff at all. And like you made me feel like invisible. Because all the racial tension that you hear, like about like the history of slavery, which is important, but like you're only allowed to learn about people of color like when we're suffering. Like we never get to hear about our accomplishments. It's only like history about like colonization and stuff. So it was like really, it made me really happy to hear that.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you.
Gotta send you to Florida.
Yeah.
And Texas.
Yeah, well, yeah, Florida and Texas are going to be a big challenge.
I want to make a comment. It's not just a struggle of Asian Americans. Whenever there's been a civil rights action, whether it be a Black issue, white issue, Latino issue, we all got together. I remember when marching on the State Park, California, to protest the lack of Asian and Latino and Black representation, and Rita was there as well. So we come from a civil rights family, and I think a lot of it, Jeffrey saw, he attended a lot of CA meetings and what have you. But whenever there's a civil rights issue, just like this movie today, or the book, it's a universal issue. We see, we feel it. It's not just us. It is all of us. And that's why in the Black civil rights movement, everybody supported it. That's why change is made. Change is made because each and one of us believes in justice. Each one of us wants to see the right thing done. Just because we had a president before who spouted things that you thought was bizarre, it was bizarre. The reality is that we are individuals thinking and feeling about our families, our kids, our future. We all have to join together, collaborate to support these causes. It's not just us. If it was our neighbor, our friends, our family, we would go out and support them. And I think we'll totally agree on that.
This is Jeffrey's father.
I was wondering if that was your dad.
Why don't you introduce?
Yeah.
Oh, and my mom's here. Rita mom.
Ah, very proud.
My sister, Allison Chin. If you're looking for a great dentist, but she'll be off for a little bit because she's about to have a baby. And then I think my brother, Bobby Chin. So if you're looking at DNA sequenced, and I got to be the artist. Well, it's an interesting, discussion in that statement, because as I did more research on Sei Fujii, I learned that even during World War II, the government was watching to see if Japanese community was going to pair up with the African American community, because that was one of the government wanted to make sure that they would keep the groups separate. And so, when we look at civil rights, it is part of working together and understanding each other's histories. Yeah.
And I know some people may disagree, but I feel that the concept of model minority came up around during that time, and it's been used as the wedge issue between our communities. And I think that it's no accident that it came up around the time when there was potential unity, among our communities, knowing our shared history. And okay, if there are no other questions, then I think, Jeffrey, you wanted to make some announcements?
Yeah, so give me 1 second so we can catch up on this. I wanted to give actually Grace Shiba. So we got sponsored by USC Asian Pacific Alumni Association for this program. And so I wanted to give Grace Shiba in the far end an opportunity to make a quick announcement. But before that, while Grace is getting ready, Ed Tepburn, stand up for a second. So quick announcement, Angel Island is reopening opening the hospital exhibit. So you're gonna have to check that out in what month? January 22nd. And it's gonna be an excellent exhibit that you all must see. Now, Grace Shiva is gonna come up here and make also another announcement. No problem.
Thank you very, very much. Why don't we give another round of applause to our wonderful panelists and to Jeffrey, and it was just really, really inspiring. Thank you very, very much. You did a wonderful job. Well, my name is Grace Shiba, and I am the Executive Director of the USC Asian Pacific Alumni Association. And you're probably wondering, why is she here? Well, Jeffrey is one of our wonderful alums of USC, and so is Mr. Sei Fujii, and he graduated in 1911, excuse me, 1911. So he's one of our esteemed Trojans. And so Jeffrey gave me this opportunity because USC, although it is late, 80 years, probably a little late, but the university has decided to award honorary degrees to our Issei students who were students at the time, the executive order 9066 was signed. And so basically the students that were there from the fall 1941 and 42, unfortunately, one day they came, one day they were in classes and the next day they found themselves, going off to various internment camps and so forth. So this is a project that I know many of these state-run schools, universities and high schools, they did award honorary degrees to their students, but unfortunately, private universities were not part of that movement. And so this is the Asian Pacific Alumni Association. We've tried, this is our third attempt. And so the first time that the university awarded alumni certificates. And so, okay, we won that. And then the second time, they said, sure, we'll give honorary degrees, but not posthumously. And so that's where, a lot of community leaders, did not give up. And, fortunately, one in particular, John Kaji, did not give up and contacted our President Carol Folt. And so once she heard the story, and she heard it from others as well, she made a decision, we need to make a wrong right. So that is where we stand, and she'll personally be awarding conferring these honorary degrees at my gala on April 1st. So that's something that we're looking forward to. What we need from the community is, the media has just been so wonderful in promoting this story, but we're looking for the families, and most likely the families of our Issei students. So if you do know of people who are affected, know stories that, that their loved ones attended USC during that time, please contact me or contact the university or get on our website. And there's a form that you could fill out. And we are trying to track all student records, but we need names. And so that's where everybody here perhaps could help us with that task. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And once again, congratulations.
Thank you. So, just want to wrap up the event, and I wanted to thank you all for coming. In the back of the room, you could pick up a copy of the book, and it comes through a donation to our historical society. We also, every single one of the books will come with a J. Marion Wright biography, which was donated by the family. We'll have book signings, and each one of us will be signing with you. And
because we had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, right. I don't know. You will be signing.
and we also have delicious refreshments, which we have mochi from across the street, Ben Kyoto, and delicious cake, as well as sake for those of age or willing from Desai from True Sake, who's actually here. And Desai is actually the factory is in the same village that Sei Fujii grew up in. And so that's what's so special. So we can have a little toast to that. Also, I want to acknowledge our USC alumni who have helped volunteer and support this program, our Historical Society members. We'll give a little wave. Steve, Mia, Marissa, her younger sister Lauren, and then Craig Tomiyoshi from IW Group, and Jerry Nakafuji, and then also my friend Brandon, who's helping shoot, and Frank Jang, and everyone else. So with that, let's see. Looks like we will be doing signings from here, and I hope you guys can have a chance to get some refreshments. My mom wanted to give a small presentation to all of the guest speakers.
Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Oh, thank you.
You guys can be released to grab snacks, and we'll hold it up in front of this table. But thank you so much for attending. And then later, you guys are welcome to meet in groups for walking back to your car if you need it.
Why don't we just stand over there by your pull-up?
Yeah.